Hi, it's Penny here, and today we're going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in March. I think I read 13 books. I am going to do this video book battle style like I normally do, where I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. This month I'm going to split my wrap-ups into two parts. The first part will be thrillers and sci-fi books because I read 4 of those, and then the rest will be all my fantasy books where I think I read 8 of those. That doesn't add up to 13, but I've grouped some up. Actually, technically, I think I read more like 27 books, but we'll get to that. So let's start out with the sci-fis and the thrillers. And our first battle is going to be between The Dry by Jane Harper and Tell Me Lies by J.P. Pomare. So let's start with The Dry. This is a copy I picked up from a book fair for a couple of dollars, mainly based on the fact that I kind of remembered there was a TV show. I think it's a movie. Why can I never remember? Anyway, some kind of TV type thing made. I think it's a movie. It's a movie, right? It's a movie? Anyway, there's a movie made from this. Let's pretend it's a movie. I'd heard good things about it. It's a murder mystery set in like the Australian outback. So there's this small town that's really been suffering from a drought. And it appears that this one man has just given up and killed his wife and his child and then himself. However, when his childhood friend turns up, who is now a police officer, he starts working with the other local police and finds some clues that maybe his friend didn't do it. But there is all through this book kind of italicized sections, or at least in my edition they're italicized, where you're getting flashbacks from his childhood where something happened in their group of friends, which again makes him question whether or not his friend did it. But also as a result of those events from their childhood, he is not on good terms with a lot of people in the town. So that's really hampering the investigation. I really liked the character building in this. I will say I did think the investigation, like, it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. I was really enjoying it in the beginning, but more and more I just felt like they were jumping at hunches rather than properly gathering evidence. And then right at the end, they kind of jumped on something very quickly with very little evidence. And as well, it did a weird perspective jump where most of this is following the childhood friend, and then suddenly we were following the main suspect and getting his perspective as well as his flashbacks, and I was just very confused about that sudden change in perspective. And as well, like the very, very ending where you learn something about the childhood events, it was kind of frustrating because I wasn't sure whether in modern times the main guy had gotten enough information to know what had happened. So then really a lot of the story is just told through flashbacks rather than like concrete proof as to what happened. I feel like I'm making it sound like I didn't enjoy this. I really enjoyed this. I just think like the ending could have been tightened up a little bit. But I think it did a really good job of like giving that small town feel and like the desperation of a really long-term drought and the effects that might have on a town. I will as well note I'm not putting this on my list of series, even though I think there are 2 more books that follow the main character, but I've heard they're not as good. Let me know if you know differently. But I think I won't continue. But I had a lot of fun with this. Then I read Tell Me Lies by J.P. Pomare. So this is a New Zealand author who's living in Australia. And this is a psychological thriller set in Melbourne, where this author now lives. And right at the beginning of the story, we see this woman push this man in front of a train. And so we're kind of waiting for the events of the story to lead up to that. Primarily, we're following this psychologist, and to be honest, my biggest frustration with this book was that she was a terrible psychologist, and I'm not sure whether that was intentional or not, and just the main character is very unlikable for the first half of the book, but I do think the payoff was worth it in the end. So she has a bunch of different clients that she's working with. One of them has like quite a traumatic past, and of course a lot of them have issues. That's the whole reason why they're seeing a psychologist. But it seems like somebody has started to follow her and follow her patients around, and some very strange things are going on. As I said, I really struggled with this in the beginning, mainly because I didn't like the psychology parts. I didn't like her with her family, just she was a horrible mother, exactly the kind of mother that I dislike. But I think it all paid off in the end. The ending, I found it actually thrilling. I liked the way all the different pieces came together. For me, that ending is kind of the ending I like from a thriller. So, if I'm comparing Tell Me Lies to The Dry, it's actually a little bit difficult because I feel like they're opposites. Like I liked both of them, but this one I liked the beginning and not the ending so much. And Tell Me Lies, I liked the ending but not the beginning so much. So like, which one was better? Depends. Am I talking about the beginnings or the endings? I do think though, like, it's the endings that land a book. It's the endings that stick with you for a story. So I think actually I'm going to pick Tell Me Lies as the winner of this battle. Then the next battle will be between 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson and Heaven's River by Dennis E. Taylor. So 9 Liars, I have it here on audiobook CD. Audio CD? Anyway, I read it on CDs. That was weird, but it was the only way I could get the audiobook. I really do think the audiobooks for this series do add a lot to it. So we're following this girl named Stevie Bell, and in the initial trilogy, she really wants to become a detective, and she's gotten a scholarship to this special school where they kind of do customized learning programs. But there's also a murder at the school that she would like to solve, and more murders start happening while she's there. Then there was a 4th book where she goes to the summer camp and solves another murder mystery, and of course in this one, she solves another murder mystery. In this one, her and her friends go on this studying abroad, like week-long trip to the UK where she gets to spend some time with her boyfriend. They're also meant to be doing a bunch of educational things, but Stevie ends up solving a murder mystery. So that gets in the way of their education, also gets in the way of her relationship a bit. I'm always surprised that I don't mind the teen angst in this series because it's not something I normally like, and I could see it would annoy some people, but I kind of like the personal aspect being mixed in with trying to solve this mystery. I liked it in the dry as well, actually. But this one, so interspersed with the chapters following Stevie as she goes to the UK and solves this murder mystery, are these chapters following this group of friends back when these murders occurred. So there's this group of college friends who are in this comedy duo called The Nine, and one of them's really rich, so they go to stay at his family estate, and for some reason they have a tradition of getting drunk and playing hide and seek at night, and by the morning 2 of them are dead. So that doesn't go well, and no one really knows what happened. They assume it was burglars. Obviously Stevie finds out that something else was going on, but it takes quite a long time. I enjoy the journey through the mystery. I'm not sure this was the best mystery in the series, but I still enjoyed it. And like this one, I think sometimes I jump on small hunches and like go with it. But I think Stevie's more like admitting that she's going on a small hunch, whereas this guy is pretending like that's solid police work. Anyway, I really like 9 Liars. I think if you've been reading the Truly Devious series and enjoying it, you'll probably like this new release as well. I believe there's going to be more books to the series. In fact, with that ending, there has to be more books to the series. Like, I do want to say, I know some people didn't like the original trilogy because it took 3 books for the mystery to be wrapped up. But this one and the 4th book, the mystery is wrapped up within each individual story. So I don't know what the next mystery will be, but in terms of Stevie's personal life, there was a bit of a cliffhanger, and I'm frustrated that we have to wait for the next book. Then I also read Heaven's River. So this is the 4th book in the Bobiverse series. I didn't actually realize there were more books after the original trilogy, and I did find a comment from Dennis E. Taylor saying that he'll just keep writing these books as long as people are interested in reading them. So I'm interested in reading them. I imagine a lot of other people are too, so there will definitely be more books in the series, which be interesting to see what direction they go in. So the Bobiverse books are about this man named Bob who was really rich, and he got himself frozen when he died. Then he wakes up and he has been made into a spaceship, essentially, so made to be the intelligence system in this spaceship. And these spaceships are like self-replicating, so he can clone new copies of himself. But each copy is a little bit different, and throughout the first trilogy, they're all focusing on different areas that kind of lead them to build up slightly different personalities. Slightly, fundamentally, they're still the same person. So in this 4th book, it did actually take me a little while to realize we were getting multiple perspectives of different Bobs, because I think we're still getting primarily the original Bob, but even the other Bobs still feel very similar to the original Bob. It's really just the area that they're focusing on that's different. Also in this particular book, the storyline is that one of the earlier Bobs at some point just decided to fly off and see what he could find, and he's never come back and they've never heard anything from him, so they've decided to try and track him down. As a result, they end up finding a new alien race, and also there's starting to be a bit of conflict within the Bobs, because now we have like the 24th generation of Bobs, and they've started to deviate from the original Bobs more and more, and now they don't all just agree with each other like the original ones do. I really enjoyed that conflict, and some of the philosophy came about as a result. I do think with these books you get a lot of nerdy jokes, a lot of science, a lot of like philosophy, scientific kind of philosophy. So I don't think these books will be for everyone. All the Bobs approach every problem with the same kind of intensity. So sometimes the books spend a lot of time on details that maybe wouldn't matter to a lot of people. But I really would recommend this series on audiobook. I actually don't even know if you can get physical books. Maybe now you can. I think they were audiobook first. But the narrator, Ray Porter, does an amazing job. So I really don't think these books would be the same in non-audiobook form as well. Like, especially he just translates all the nerdy jokes so well, adding voices to it that suit the joke. Anyway, definitely recommend these on audiobook. But like, if you're not into sciencey science fiction, maybe not. But also these are still quite fun. So if you really like sciencey science fiction, then maybe this isn't for you either. I don't know, but I have a lot of fun with them. So if I'm putting Nine Liars and Heaven's River up against each other, it's kind of hard. I feel very similarly about both of them. Like, they were both just a lot of fun. There probably were parts in the Bobiverse book that I felt were a bit drawn out and I was less engaged with. But also I think some of the topics and themes that book covered were deeper than what you get in Nine Liars. You know, I think I'd probably recommend the Bobiverse books to more people. You know, I just recommend them to completely different people. But I probably recommend the Bobiverse books more to people like me, because I'm kind of surprised I like this series as much as I do. I find it very addictive, which I don't know if I'd say for the Bobiverse books. But they are infinitely readable as well. I don't know, this could go either way, but I think what I'm going to do is pick Heaven's River as the winner of this battle. And now, just quickly, we will pick the top science fiction thriller. I don't know why I'm grouping these ones together. Convenience, I think. So we'll be putting Tell Me Lies by J.P. Pomare up against Heaven's River by Dennis E. Taylor. Both of these books, I struggled a bit at the beginning to get into them, but ended up really loving them. Still, there was like some action scenes at the end of Heaven's River that were dragged out a little bit, whereas at the end of Tell Me Lies, the action was what I really liked. It's what I found really thrilling. So, based purely on that, and we're not going to think it any deeper, I'm going to pick Tell Me Lies as the best thriller / sci-fi. I guess just the best thriller that I read in the month of March. Okay, so now let's move on to the fantasy books that I read in March. And we'll do, firstly, a battle of Seanan McGuire books. So I've got Into the Windwracked Wilds by A. Deborah Baker up against Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. Maybe you're thinking, you said 2 Seanan McGuire books, but this one's by A. Deborah Baker. No, A. Deborah Baker is Seanan McGuire. So these books, this is the 3rd book in the series, and the idea is that in Middle Game by Seanan McGuire, there is a character called A. Deborah Baker who wrote some children's books to try and get ideas into the minds of society so that then she could use those concepts to do alchemy. And then Seanan McGuire actually created these books. I love that idea so much. And I actually really liked the first book. We have got this girl named Hepzibah and this boy named Avery. Hepzibah's very eccentric and not afraid to try things. Avery is very straight-laced and likes to follow the rules. And they find themselves in this magical world of the Up and Under where they're trying to follow the improbable road to get to the impossible city so that eventually they can get home. And as I said, I really liked the first book. Then I read the second book, Along the Saltways Sea, and I hated it. I thought the whole thing was pointless. Nothing happened. What a waste of everyone's life. And I kind of DNF'd the series. But then I suck at DNFing things, and I saw this was available at the library, and I was very curious because I hadn't heard anyone talk about it, even though I saw a lot of people giving that second book good reviews. So I picked this one up, and actually it wasn't as bad as the second book. And I do think now I'll read the 4th and what I assume will be the final book that's coming out later in the year, just to like get some closure. But still, this wasn't the best. There was a bit at the beginning that was still kind of based around the element of water, which really I think belonged in the previous book. and then kind of just nonsense was happening for most of the book until the very last 20 pages, and I thought, this is the plot. We've found it. This is the plot of the book that you should have been using for the whole book. Why did you wait until the last 20 pages to get to the plot of the book? And why didn't you develop it better? So, even though I like this one better, still overall a big disappointment from what I think it could have been. I just get so frustrated with this series because I think it had so much potential and I just don't think it's living up to it. And while we're saying that kind of stuff, let's talk about Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. I've seen a lot of people say best book in the series, and I don't agree. So this is the 8th book in the Wayward children's series, where we follow these children who found magical doors and gone through them and had a magical adventure, and then for whatever reason found themselves back in our normal world, and they've been really struggling, as you would expect, to get back to normal life. And most of them are hoping to find their doors again. So there is a school for wayward children where these children can go and be around other people or other children who've had a similar experience. And every second book in this series is a story of some child finding their door. In this one, we're following a girl named Antoinette. Why do I always doubt her name? Antoinette. She goes by the name Antsy. And she ends up finding this world, which is kind of like a store of lost and found things. But the first half of the book is really about child grooming, or it's sort of about that, but it never really quite gets there in my opinion. I think because Seanan McGuire was kind of writing this from experience, which is not great, and I think she didn't really want to get into it, which I can't blame her for. In fact, to be honest, I don't really want to read about it, even though probably it is a good thing to learn about, so that you could be aware of what might be happening. But I also found it really strange that the trigger warnings at the beginning are all for child grooming, and there's no mention of trigger warnings for traumatic death of a parent, which honestly was dealt with much more intensely than the child grooming. Anyway, then she runs off to this world of Lost and Found, and there were a lot of things there that could have been linked into the themes, but I felt like it never quite developed the world enough to do it. Until, again, like the last 20 pages, when we suddenly got to the plot of the book, and I was once again left thinking, this could have been so much more if it had just been developed a little bit longer. Maybe it could have been a slightly longer book. It could have been really good, but I don't think it was. I think for me it had a lot of potential, but it didn't go where it needed to be to give me what I would want in a book that's doing what this book is doing. Anyway, that's a very unpopular opinion from what I can see from the reviews, so I don't know, but I think I might have to stop reading Seanan McGuire books, and I'm kind of bummed about it because there have been some things by her that I've really loved, so now I don't know. It's all very sad. Anyway, if I had to pick a best one from these two, I would pick Lost in the Moment and Found. Or if I was just going purely by the last 20 pages, I'd probably pick this one, but we're not doing that, so Lost in the Moment and Found just overall did have more to the story in it than this one. Okay, next let's do a battle of witchy books. So we've got Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo up against A Spell on Wheels graphic novels by Kate Leth, Megan Levens, and Marissa Louise. So firstly, Hellbent. This is the sequel to Ninth House, and I believe it's going to be an ongoing series. I'm not sure if it's a trilogy or a longer series. I feel like myself, once I finish this, I feel like it's trying to set itself up to be like a Buffy type demon hunting series, maybe? Anyway, we're following Alex Stern. She is able to see ghosts, and so she's managed to get herself this position at Yale with the Ninth House, who are kind of like the police officer type people for the other magical houses on the Yale campus. Basically trying to make sure that these houses don't do any really dangerous magic or cause any harm to other people. But Alex has quite a dark past and doesn't really have any of the normal qualifications for studying at Yale. And so in some ways this is a really great opportunity for her. She doesn't seem to ever take advantage of it. Partly because she has a lot of trauma, partly because there's a lot going on at the Ninth House. Her mentor in the previous book, we learned that he had gone missing, and in this one, I want to say that she's focused on getting him back, but is she? Because she for at least the first half of the book, seems to be mucking around with a lot of other things. I was so mad by the middle of the book when they'd been planning to do this very dangerous ritual for like a couple of weeks. And then the night before, they sit down for the first time to look at the details of the ritual. Are you fucking kidding me? Why would you do that? It just makes no sense to me. And there were a lot of things in this book that didn't make any sense to me. And so even though there were parts of it that I did enjoy, I did think the second half was a lot better. But for me, I didn't feel like any of the relationships with the characters had enough foundation in actual events. And I kind of feel like the way Leigh Bardugo writes characters, to me, always just feels like she's writing ideas rather than truly developing the characters. Again, I'm sure this is a very unpopular opinion, but I don't know. This book series, like, it's fine. It's fine. I like this. There's a lot of potential, again. But was it amazing? Probably not. As well, I saw Ashley from Frolic Through Fiction mention this. It's not really dark academia because Alex isn't even thinking about her studies. So, like, there is no academia, even though it's set at Yale. There's none of that, like, obsession over studying and learning. Alex is always kind of annoyed about any of that part of things. If I had to wrap this up, I would just call it Buffy wannabe. Anyway, the other thing that I read, I actually had a lot of fun with, maybe because it's not trying as hard to be anything deep, but this is Spell on Wheels. So we've basically got this group of 3 witches, and in the first book, they get burgled, and they're basically trying to track down the thief. The thief has sold a lot of their stuff, so they're stopping off in different locations on this road trip to try and find all their stuff, having little adventures along the way before they finally find out what's really going on. Then in this one, they have this compass that allows them to track down people who have the potential to become witches. And they're tracking down this witch, but this witch and one of our witches have been having, like, experiences where they swap bodies. And honestly, I wish this series continued. I don't think it does. But that witch that they meet, I think, could have been a really cool future nemesis that they could keep interacting with. And, like, is she a friend? Is she not? Like, this series, I want it to be a TV show and I want it to be ongoing. I think there's so many themes that could be explored through it. I don't know that these books actually did that. So maybe in this case, it's me who's liking a book based on the ideas rather than the actual execution. But, like, anyway, I just think these were a lot of fun. So if you like this kind of art style, I would say the art inside isn't exactly like that, but it's still quite, like, bright and fun. And there's lots of witchy shenanigans. So, this is not what I expected. But if I'm putting these 2 books up against each other, I'm actually going to pick Spell on Wheels. I just think it was more fun, better executed. Okay, then our next battle we're going to have Before They Are Hanged by Jo Abercrombie up against The Hope of Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. So Before They Are Hanged is the second book in the First Law trilogy, which I am reading along with Becca and the Books' Catch-Up Book Club. I did really enjoy the conversation from the live show, which was just before I got into this book, and so it was fun to have all those ideas in my head while I read this book. I do think in the first book we're really just getting to know the characters. We've got a warrior from the north who's kind of lost everyone that he loves and doesn't know where he wants to go now. We've got a spoiled noble who really just wants fame and glory. We've also got a torturer who was a successful soldier until he himself was tortured. And we've also got the first of the Magi who is kind of bringing them together. In the first book, we're just getting to know them all and getting to know the world. This one, the world unpacks itself a lot further. We travel around a bit. And as well, the characters start to get to know each other. I loved watching their relationships build and the development of certain characters. And also, I just really loved watching everything go wrong. I think in my vlog, I was talking about how at the end of this book, I don't actually know if the characters have really achieved anything. Everything is still kind of a disaster. So really, all this book achieved is helping the reader to understand what's going on and to understand these characters. And I guess just for the characters to learn more about themselves. I really don't know how the third book is going to wrap things up for this trilogy, but I'm excited to see everything go wrong for everyone. That's what I'm expecting will actually happen. But you can see I tabbed this book during my reading experience, even though this is a library book, so that was kind of stupid, but there was just a lot of things that I loved about this book. It is fairly dark in some points, but it is kind of counterbalanced with a certain amount of humor, especially when things are getting particularly dark. I will say at the end of this book, like at the end of the first book, there was an action sequence that I felt went on longer than I would have liked. Maybe that's just my preference for like battle scenes to be short and to the point. But there were also a lot of parts in this where we are following along with characters participating in a war, and I did think those bits were well done. Just that battle scene at the end. Like, it's meant to be the climax of the story, and it's just boring to me. I don't know. Anyway, still, I really like this. Then, the other one I read is The Hope of Elantris. So this is really short. It's really just a short story, I think like 25 pages or something. Kind of just letting you know what some characters were doing during the end of Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I think I read somewhere that Brandon Sanderson said this was filling a plot hole. I don't really think it was a plot hole. It's just some characters doing something that really doesn't add that much to the story. So it didn't need to be in the original book, and probably it didn't need to be written. However, having just reread Elantris, it was nice just to get a little bit more time with some of the characters, a little bit more story. There are meant to be more Elantris books at some point, but like given Brandon Sanderson's writing schedule, I don't expect that will actually be anytime soon, which is kind of sad because I really like the world of Elantris. So I had a lot of fun with this story, even though I don't think it's anything especially deep or anything especially necessary or even adding that much to the story. It's just a little bit of fun if you want a little bit more Elantris. I haven't really talked about what the plot is about, but it's mainly just about saving the children while Elantris is being attacked. I think it's so short that you can't really talk any more about it. So if I'm putting these two books up against each other, I think just because there's so much more to Before They Are Hanged than The Hope of Elantris, I think I'm going to pick Before They Are Hanged as the winner of this battle. Okay, then our last battle is between a couple of older book series. So we've got the complete collection of Oz by Frank Baum up against 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. I think my next vlog that will be up after this one, is that the order I'm doing things? I'm not sure. But I listened to an audiobook of the entire collection of Oz books by Frank Baum because I'm going to soon be seeing the musical Wicked, and I kind of wanted to read all the source material for it. So 14 Oz books. It was a lot, especially because not all of them were great. I do really like The Wizard of Oz. I think my favorite of the series is the third book, Ozma of Oz, because it is very similar to the Return of Oz movie, which was my favorite movie, even though it's very dark, because it starts out with Dorothy being sent for electroshock therapy because she keeps talking about Oz and everyone thinks she's crazy. Anyway, we're not talking about that movie, but I love that movie, and the third book was very similar to it. But I do feel like Frank Baum seems like he didn't actually want to write 14 Oz books. At the end of the sixth book even, he tried to say, oh well, no communication with Oz anymore, so I can't write any more Oz books. And then the seventh book, it kind of seems like he caved to pressure to give the children more. But also, a lot of the Oz books, he doesn't set it in Oz. A lot of the characters are completely new characters that he creates. I get the feeling Frank Baum really loved creating new, strange characters and going to new locations. So a lot of the books are just journeys and meeting new people. And so I read this thinking there would be a lot of world building for Wicked that it would have built upon, but really there wasn't. I am still glad that I read the Oz books, even though the writing style is an older writing style. And there's some bits where he goes on a lot of puns, a lot of wordplay, or just like really focusing in on a part that I don't care about. But there were also some really amazing parts, like where the Tin Woodman meets his original head. you know, the non-tin one. And I also really loved Polychrome, who was like the rainbow's daughter, and often she just falls off the rainbow and gets lost for a little while, joins in on different adventures. Like, there are lots of really cool characters in Oz and some really cool ideas. I'm glad I listened to the audiobook because I'm not sure I would have gotten through it physically. I think a lot of the books as well seem to be designed for like reading a chapter a night. I think if you wanted to read the whole series, that would probably take your whole child's childhood to get through it. But anyway, I thought the Oz books were a lot of fun. Not exactly what I was expecting. And also, when I say they were fun, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading them purely for fun. I'd only recommend reading them if you have a particular interest in learning more about Oz, because I just think they're a little bit dated and they're probably not what you're expecting. The first few books are the best books. Anyway, then the other book in this battle is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. This one also was not what I was expecting. I was told, I mean, I guess maybe I should have expected it. I was told this is one of the earlier stories with magical realism in it, and I was excited. And actually, I quite liked the magical realism parts in this, but the way that the rest of the story was told is not the kind of writing style that I like. It's always written like in that mode where it's telling you what's happened rather than ever like having a scene or like hearing the characters' dialogue or anything like that. And we're always just like following along with different characters in this family. So it's like a family saga, and you never get to spend very long with any character before it moves on to the next part of the story. Same with the magical realism. Like, I thought there were some really cool ideas that some interesting things could have been done with, but instead of doing something interesting, it just moves on. To be honest, I think I listened to about 30% of the audiobook of this, and then I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. Maybe I could have dealt with just moving on to more and more characters constantly, but there was also a lot in here where it was like men not being able to control themselves once they became obsessed with a woman, and there was one man who like became obsessed with this 9-year-old girl and insisted on marrying her and sleeping with her, and just like, I was not interested. I was not having a good time. I've been trying to DNF more, so I decided this was the time. So for this battle between 100 Years of Solitude and the Oz books, obviously the Oz books are going to win. Okay, so let's do a little fantasy semi-final. Firstly, we're going to have the Spell on Wheels books up against Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. I think quite obviously this one I thought was a disappointment, so we're going to pick Spell on Wheels as the winner of the battle. And then the next battle will be between Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie and the Complete Oz Collection by Frank Baum. Again, the Oz books were fun, but not everything I'd hoped they would be. And like just an older writing style and older themes and just not so relevant to modern times. However, Before They Were Hanged, I had a really great time, even though it's all just a book of awful things happening. But I loved seeing the characters developed. I loved seeing their relationships form. The Oz books, nothing's serious, nothing's real. There's no real character development of anybody. These books, I just really love the character development. So I'm going to pick Before They Are Hanged as the winner of this battle. Then if I'm putting Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie up against the Spell on Wheels books. The Spell on Wheels books were fun. However, there's just not as much depth to them as there is for Before They Are Hanged. So Before They Are Hanged will be the best fantasy book that I read in the month of March. And we're going to battle it against the best thriller, which was Tell Me Lies by J.P. Pomare. Even though I really liked the ending of that, and I thought the action at the end of that was done much better than the action of this, I still just love the characters in Before They Are Hanged so much more. So this is going to be the best book of the month. It's probably not a surprise. Was the first book the best book of last month? I can't remember. Anyway, I'm really loving this series. I do recommend it if you like books that are a little bit darker and don't mind lots of awful things happening to your characters, and like also don't mind quite a slow-paced plot. There is still things happening all the time though. Kind of. Anyway, best book of the month. Let me know what great things you've been reading lately, or if you have any thoughts and opinions on any of the books I've talked about today, because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.